All right, welcome back to our YouTube channel. My name is Lloyd Ross, and I'm here to teach you all the things about money that you wish you learned in school. So one thing you definitely wouldn't have learned in school, no way, is what is inflation. You would not have. Very few people actually who deal in money know really what inflation is too. So let me teach you this, what inflation is, and then I'll explain some of the ramifications of that, how it affects you, and how to maybe to outpace it or beat it, or how to protect yourself from the inflationary costs that happen. So let me explain what inflation is first. Inflation, people often think it's a devalue of the currency. So they think, oh, if inflation goes up, it means inflation's high, it means the value of money is going down. In fact, money is actually valueless, just so you know. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a way we exchange goods and services. It's just an intermediary. That's all it is. It just prevents us from bartering with each other, which is really inconvenient. So that's all money is. It's not a thing. It's what it represents, gives it value. When they say inflation, they mean price inflation of goods and services. So inflation meaning getting bigger, inflate, and it means that prices of goods and services are inflating. It means they're going up. That's really what inflation is. And so, for example, inflation occurs when there's a lot of spending in the economy. So people are spending, usually borrowing a lot and spending a lot on lots of different stuff. It could be that there's lack of supply of goods and services, which means the price of them go up because supply is lower. Or it could mean that because there's cheap debt, there's a lot of demand for goods and services. And when that happens, when supply is lower or demand is higher or both, it means the cost or price of goods and services goes up. And that's what makes it look like our dollars are going down, because our dollars or our currency is buying less of the good or service that it used to. So it looks like the currency is deflating or going down in value, but it's actually, things are getting more expensive. As a result of that, our money buys less things. And that's why inflation sucks. And so inflation occurs when I said before about goods being not available, goods and services, less availability of that means inflation goes up. But also demand means how many people want those goods and services going up also creates inflation. So what's happening in June 2022 is we are at the highest level of inflation ever, right? Well, not ever, probably since 80s. So 40 years, ever in my lifetime. So what's driving that is like inflation in Australia, they reckon it's 5.5%. I think it's more like 8%. In America, it's more like 8 or 10% reality, right? It's really high. That means every year at the moment, goods and services, the cost of them is going up by 8 to 10%, right? Which means the value of our money has perceived to fall by 8 to 10%. So if you're on 100 grand a year, you're on six figures, you're now automatically, because of the things you can buy, on 90,000 a year. Okay, that's just what your 100,000 can now buy. You can only buy $90,000 worth of products and services. And that hurts because like flipping heck, like now it feels like I just don't have enough money, right? And that's where inflation can get people, and it is a real thing. And so what it actually is it's actually a tax on purchasing goods and services, because you only incur inflationary costs when you decide to take the money you earn and buy things with it, because that means you're actually spending it, and that's where you're losing the value of it. So it's like a tax on buying things. And so when inflation goes up, the market kind of corrects the spending patterns a bit, and people organically stop spending as much because it's dearer. It's more expensive to spend on things. So they stop spending. So the market slowly does bring inflation under control because people stop spending. So the demand falls. What happens is because prices of goods and services were so high, people are making more of it and there's more supply, and the market corrects slowly. So inflation will go through its own cycles of up and down, but typically inflation will be really high when interest rates are really low, because it means people are borrowing a ton of money for cheap and spending it on things and stuff. So the demand is really high for goods and services. So it means that inflation is going to be higher. Plus, what's happening right now is because of COVID, they locked all the supply chain down. So all of a sudden you've got like boats and cars and all that sort of stuff. They're in low supply. So the combination of the high demand from really cheap money, so low interest rates and cheap debt, that's high demand, plus the really low supply of things, because the supply chain and all the boats that deliver goods to our countries is low and it's not happening. You're getting this really gnarly combination of what creates a lot of high inflation. And that's why we're seeing this. What happens in the economy to combat it, to stop inflation going? Because if inflation goes to 100%, all of a sudden a $100 bill lost its whole value. So you'd have to spend $100. You have to spend $200 to get what an item costs for $100 today. Okay, so if a pair of shoes cost $100 today, if inflation goes up by 100%, it's now $200. Your money gets cut in half, right? It's not good. What happened in the 30s in Germany, there was hyperinflation that preceded World War II. People don't know this either. But in Germany, I think it was a Deutschmark, I haven't done the research, the local currency, they hyperinflated it. And what happened was hyperinflated. It cost thousands of dollars, or the Deutschmark, whatever the local currency was, to buy milk. So they would take wheelbarrows of actual paper money down to the shops to buy stuff. That means the currency is hyperinflated. Okay, it's now worthless. You don't want that to happen. And that's why getting inflation under control is important. And the way to do that is in an economy that the Reserve Bank of Australia, the RBA, or the Federal Reserve, please don't fall asleep. I know this is weird, economics talk, but I want to teach you this, right? How they bring inflation down is they increase interest rates. Because what that does is it slows the demand, because people then stop borrowing as much to buy stuff. So the demand of goods and services drops, which means that then there's probably a bit of an oversupply of stuff, which will also drop the price of things. So interest rates, really, when they go up, it brings inflation down. When interest rates fall, inflation goes up. So they really cool the economy. They calm the spending down when they increase interest rates. And then most people spit the dummy. Okay, that's Australian parlance for they get annoyed when the RBA or the Federal Reserve increase interest rates. Like, oh, why they increase interest rates? My mortgage is now going to cost more. Yes, should have known that before you got to flip a mortgage. Do you understand how mortgages work? It's borrow money, and when interest rates are high, cost you more money in mortgage to pay back. Right? That's how flipping works. If you don't understand that, sit down with your bank manager for goodness sake and understand what you've just done. If you've got out a $1.5 million mortgage and you're like, oh, interest rates are going to go up. No shit, they're going to go up. They've been the lowest in 5,000 years at 0.1%. What did you think was going to happen? Honestly, that is just, if you're shocked by this with your mortgage going up, you shouldn't have got a mortgage, frankly, right? Hell, what will happen now is as rates go up, debt becomes more expensive, economy will cool, inflation will come down. And that's how the government helps to cool the inflationary pressures we have. Plus, COVID is gone now, effectively. So the supply chains will be opened up. They'll catch up to themselves again. And what will happen is there'll be a massive oversupply of boats, cars, and stuff like that. And you'll see a lot of the price inflation focus like, whoa, it's really cheap now to get that stuff because it's readily available. So you'll see that happen. It'll go whoop, it'll flip back and it'll adjust asset prices, like shares will become cheaper, real estate will become cheaper because debt's more expensive. That's what happens. So how do you protect yourself from it? Well, if you own property, it's really good. I think it's good to own property during inflationary periods. I also think it's good to own companies that have what we call pricing power. So if you're going to own shares, if you own shares in Apple, you own shares in say like oil companies and stuff, what happens is during inflationary periods, they print more money. Grocery companies, like if you own Woolworths shares, because what they can do, pricing power means they can just increase their prices as the cost inflation of things goes up. They can just increase their prices without compressing their profit margin. And that's why investing in those shares and those companies is good in inflationary times, because you're still going to get the profit margin. Because people will still buy iPhones with their last dollar, and they will still buy groceries with their last dollar. So they're things that people need to live and survive. So shelter, food, and basically life, like everything you do is on this. So it's a need. And if you invest in companies in oil, right, energy, if you invest in companies like that, they always keep their margins high during inflationary times and during recessions generally. Not to the exact amount, but they're very good businesses to own. So I think what you don't want to do is have your money under the mattress during inflationary times. That's no good. But I think if you're doing that, be prepared to buy assets for cheaper. Do I think Bitcoin's a hedge against inflation? Obviously not. I think it's, so what's that? What Bitcoin's gone down, what is it? 60%? It's gone down 60% in the last few months, and inflation's at 8%. So it's not a good hedge against inflation. So that story is invalid. And if you haven't seen any of my stuff on Bitcoin, you know that I don't think is anything. So be careful of people that say this will help you in inflationary times. The things I just explained will help you the most. I don't think gold is going to do it long term, because eventually inflation will come down and you're stuck with a lump of gold. You're like, uh-oh. So buying things that produce income is really important, right? Real estate and good quality stocks, I think you'll be fine. One of the best things you can do to combat inflation is go get a side hustle, learn how to make more money, invest in yourself to value yourself up, to get a pay rise of $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000. That's a great way to combat inflation. Start a business, great way to combat inflation. Get a second income, right? That fixes it pretty quick. And of course, during inflationary periods when things go up and you get to increase your income or your value to get more income, stop spending money. Don't go and buy the coffees. Don't go and buy the shoe. Just cool your jets when you're spending, and you won't have to pay the cost of inflationary tax. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope you enjoyed that economics lesson right there that you wish you learned in school. Hey, but it helps because now you know what inflation is, how it affects you, how it's controlled, and you know why interest rates have to go up. And you know that if you've got debt, it's going to cost more money. You know what to do in the future when it drops. I'm trying to teach you stuff where you can think about the economy and where you're placed and positioned to have success in it with your investing, with your money, how to combat it, why you want to start us up. That's really important. And they don't teach it at school, right? So that's one great lesson I really am glad that we did. And I hope you haven't fallen asleep. And I hope that was as entertaining as economics can possibly be. Hey, if you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button. Check out our podcast, Money Grows on Trees. We'll pop the show link in the show notes. And look forward to seeing you on the next lesson of Lloyd's Money School.